Thank you guys for joining us for another Cannabis Lab networking Thursday evening at 6 p.m. I'm your host. Well, I'm not your host. I'm helping manage the Miami and Fort Lauderdale chapters as best I can, volunteer to do so, and helping make sure these things run as smoothly as possible. And so I'll kick it off by introducing the one and only Ari Gerstin with the Akerman law firm to present a great panel that I think we can all be very excited to hear about. Obviously, some of and probably the most important people in the system right now are the physicians that are and have been working with patients and helping them deal with a variety of conditions and navigate the system, which has changed enormously from when it first came out in the States to where it is now, and still continues to. So, Ari, I don't know if you want to kind of take over,
Sure.
talk a little bit about our event, but the title of the event is How Physicians Are Turning Over a New Leaf with Cannabis and Hemp, and our host will be Ari Gerstin.
Thank you, Eric.
I'm going to
Welcome,
shut my
everyone.
video and let you guys handle things. If there's any questions in the chat, feel free to answer those, or Amanda or somebody else will hop on and I'll be listening in.
Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome to our evening event. We have a great panel tonight. We have two physicians who are very experienced with recommending, and one of them is actually a medical director for one of our MMTCs in Florida currently. So we have a lot of information to offer and to discuss. And also there's been some very interesting developments very recently in Florida. So I think we're going to start out now by, why doesn't everyone introduce themselves? We could start out, I don't know if the order is the same on everyone's screen, probably not, but Charles Felix is at the top left for me. So if you could just please introduce yourself and tell us how you're involved with physicians and medical marijuana in Florida, that would be great.
Well, I am the publisher and owner of Cannabis News Florida, and obviously a monthly publication and e-newsletter, not to mention a website. But just recently, in the last, I guess, 2 or 3 months, we started a small group. We kind of put some names into a hat and pulled it out, and came up with a Florida Medical Marijuana Physicians Group. I think I got that right, if I'm not mistaken. And we meet every other Wednesday evening and talk about the problems facing the physicians. And I guess I'm on the call because of that. Or it could be because I do marry people on the side and I'm a doctor of divinity. So that could be the reason why I'm on here, because I'm a doctor of divinity. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, marijuana and marriage is definitely something.
Hey, it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yes. All right, let's go to Dr. Bottaro. You are next on my screen here.
All right. Well, first off, thank you so much for putting this together. Thanks for having me. I was on a panel, or not on a panel, but I was on a meeting the other day, and I was just saying how much I miss this camaraderie and to have these meetings, to have these little panels, and where we can really talk, and COVID kind of set that back a lot. So thank you for putting this together, and really looking forward to what comes out of it tonight. So anyway, I started in medical cannabis here in Florida towards the end of 2016 when it first became legalized. Saw patients, ended up seeing by the end of my clinical stint, saw about 6,500, 7,000 patients in just under 3 years, and then moved over to the MMTC side of things, and now am the medical director for Surterra Wellness, which parent company is Parallel. And so I've been doing that for about 1.5 years now, and kind of seeing that side of things, and being able to take the experience I had and as a clinician, and really seeing those patients one-on-one, and bringing that over to the industry side, and to really help connect the two, where, I felt like, when the industry first started, there was definitely a gap. And I think that we have, over the years, as you said, it's changed tremendously. But over the years, we've really been able to bridge that gap. And it's been a really awesome thing to be a part of bridging that gap. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for having me.
Great. And Dr. Weiner?
Sure. So I'm a pain management physician in South Florida. And I've been, like Nick, using medical cannabis for almost 4 years in my practice. I'm a little bit more holistic, more of an integrative pain management physician, less of an interventional pain management doctor now. And I'm part of the Medical Marijuana Advisory Committee in Florida, and also Charles Felix's wonderful new organization. I really just am here to help any physicians who have any questions, and really try to educate our physicians to help them get a little bit more comfortable. And Nick and I were talking about this before, because some of us who have been doing this for just a few years get looked at as if we're experts, or as if, having all this experience obviously gives us a lot of knowledge. However, we all need to learn from each other. And so it's a good platform, especially like what Charles does, that we can all participate as physicians, talk about case examples, and learn about different dispensaries and products. I think all that's really important. Right now, I am very involved in research. So I have a study going on that the Florida Consortium of Medical Marijuana Grants just gave myself and part of FAU $67,500 to study seniors taking medical cannabis who have chronic pain. And and now I actually finished a study looking at using cannabis as a substitute for opioids, and a few other projects I have going on, but I'm looking more to do research, clinical, and also on specific products in the cannabis industry.
Okay, well, that's I think a great segue, because the first thing I wanted to talk about was the new products that have been released recently that are now on the market. And I wanted to ask you, actually, throughout your time in the program, like you say, it is true that, we have a short history, except we are considered experts because we've been around since the program started, I guess, in 2015 or before. How have you seen the interest in patients for edibles throughout I guess, from the start to now? And is this something that you would recommend for physicians to recommend to their patients, or something for patients that should maybe be a little bit cautious with?
So I remember, like, probably 2 years, and I think Eric Stevens was there. We had a meeting to discuss passing edibles. Like, that was probably 2 years ago, and we talked about what the symbol would look like, and we compared it to what's going on in California, and how to divide the milligrams evenly. And so this has been going on for a while. So I'm less excited about edibles, because I've been teaching patients how to make their own edibles, or how to take tinctures and put it in their own food and make an edible. So I think a lot of patients are excited about it because it's easy. And I think that they should just be cautious, because we all know that the THC converts in the liver to from Delta 9 to 11, and that is a more potent form of THC. So not only do you have to wait for it to absorb and metabolize in your body, but you also have to worry about the fact that you may have more of an intoxicating effect from it that's going to last a lot longer. So I'm always with the, start low and go slow. Maybe 5 milligrams would probably be best. Use it first at night for sleep. The other interesting thing about edibles is that, they're always appealing to kids. It's gummies and chocolate and things like that, but that also appeals to adults, obviously. But I think it's not just dose, but also we have to think about what other options they have. If it's a good price point, compare a capsule to, let's say, a tincture in food. And then how to secure it away from children, I think, is really important. And I don't want that to happen in Florida, where a child does take an edible and has an uncomfortable outcome. So it is really important for people and patients to understand where to store that. And I think edibles will be a very popular thing, but I think people should just be cautious always, and really just understand it before they get into it.
Certainly, I remember those fear tactics about the weed candy that was going to be handed out at Halloween and things like that from back in 2014 and 2016. So that's definitely something that we want to avoid, getting any sort of negative publicity about the market. That's certainly true. It sounds like patients have been interested in edibles for a long time, that they've been making their own, haven't really been able to wait the last 2 years for the Department of Health to get their act together.
I'd say they've been waiting. I mean, I remember day one, patients are, well, when are edibles coming? Well, maybe soon.
Yeah.
that was 3 years ago. So Um, and to kind of, Dr. Weiner made great points there. And I think as a clinician, it's not, there's really no change for us because it's medically speaking, it's the same exact thing as the oral routes we've already been experiencing. So, and having to educate on. So if you're using tinctures, if you're using capsules, it's still in the body the same as if it was baked into a brownie. So from a purely medical standpoint, it's a lot of the same education, but it's really important to just further that education and back that education up, you know, to physicians and then those physicians to their patients, is that those brownies or those candies might taste really good, but you still want to pay attention to that dosing. That dosing is so important. Um, and then one other thing that patients should definitely be aware of is more than just, yes, obviously THC content, CBD content, but also terpene content. And if there's different terpenes in these edibles, some, a lot of edibles do not have it. And so is there a difference between a tincture, which may have a terpene profile to it, which will really affect the overall feeling and outcome of that medicine, compared to an edible that may or may not have any terpenes in it. And so now you're not only comparing just the milligram amounts, but you also want to be looking at the overall experience of what this is. So different things to pay close attention to. And then, of course, as Michelle was saying, the safety of it is super important, keeping these things locked away, and out of reach of anybody that we don't want having it.
Now, when you say terpene content, if you could just explain for the folks that might not know exactly what would be the difference between something that would have terpene content and what wouldn't, and how that might impact how someone would know the difference. Perhaps for people who might not understand, they might think just THC content is all that really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, it's going to take it's a much bigger topic than what I can shorten in 30 seconds. But basically, there's three main medicines in a cannabis product that you want to look at. It's your CBD, your amount of CBD, your amount of THC, so your cannabinoid ratio. And there's other cannabinoids too in there that you might be looking at. And then also your terpene profile. Now, the terpene profile is going to be more of a little bit more of the effect, the overall feeling of the medicine. So a terpene profile is really truly what's going to make you relaxed and more tired. So or more uplifted and energetic. And so, very commonly we hear these terms of sativa, indica, hybrid, and they're very generic terms that don't really mean much, but at a deeper level, all that means is actually what terpenes are in it. And so if you have a terpene profile in a tincture that's designed to, say, maybe give you a boost during the day, then you're not only going to get your THC and CBD medicine in there, but you're also going to get a little boost in the day, like it kind of had a cup of coffee. Or you're going to take a different terpene profile or an indica at nighttime to help you get to sleep. So these things may or may not be found in the edibles, but they are going to be found in a lot of the tinctures and sometimes even in the capsules. So there are these little nuances, but they make a difference to the patient. And so if you're dealing with somebody that, that has pain, where a nice 1-to-1 ratio is going to be really helpful for them at, say, a 10 milligram dose, well, maybe they might have a different product that they use in the morning that's a 1-to-1 10 milligram dose than the one that they use in the evening that's a 1-to-1 10 milligram dose. And so that's where the terpenes come into play. And it'll be interesting to see the different, what some of the different companies are coming out with. And everybody's done a great job with the tinctures, but I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what the market will have for our patients.
Well, it's a good point, because the two places I've seen that has edibles would right now, I think it's Curaleaf and Trueleaf. And I've heard the patients say to me, are they strain specific? And, we try to get away from saying, again, sativa and indica and look more in the terpene profile, but the edibles that are coming out now, there is no strain. And so I wonder if the COA of the edibles actually has the terpene profile, because most patients just want the edible. And I wonder if they're, sometimes it's the mindset, right? So let's say you don't know what it is. I wonder if it's actually truly, if there's no terpenes in there, then there's no effect to be guided, right? It's just what the THC is going to do. But if it is a specific strain, meaning there are terpenes in it, I wonder if they don't know about what it is, if they're going to actually use it for sleep and use it for daytime and have different effects. So it's just a question I'm interested to see in Florida when we're using edibles in general, that if they don't know the strain and they can't stick to that in their mindset, this is my daytime, this is my nighttime medicine, I wonder how successful they'll be trying to achieve their goal, not knowing exactly what's in it. Because I have a feeling that people who like edibles, they'll continue it for sleep, for daytime, and they may even use the same ones. But we'll see. I don't know too much about edibles based on the fact that we don't have our patients using it, but I do know that a lot of the patients take their own cannabis and then make it into the edible that they want. So if they want it for sleep, they'll take a specific terpene profile. So it'll be nice to see. Let's see how developed Florida gets in terms of adding into the edibles. And because now you ask them what's the strain and they'll say passion fruit, and that's the flavor of the gummy, right? So we'll see how it evolves and how the patient's response is.
Yeah, I will say traditionally edibles don't have they're not strain specific, they're not terpene filled. If you look at other markets, California, Michigan, all these other places, and they're typically, it's just a THC CBD within some kind of edible form. But I think this is, Florida's always been, we have pushed, really pushed to drive the medical component of this. So it will be great to see, and Surterra has some great products coming out in the next couple of weeks too. So really looking forward to just seeing the response in the market. They've been asking, patients have been asking us forever, and it's exciting that the DOH, working together with the DOH has been really fruitful. And not to use an edible analogy there, or a pun, but it's been really great to have them guide us in the rulings to now get these edibles out, and then to be able to produce safe, effective medicine that patients have been asking for.
Nick, can I ask you a question with Surterra? What percentage are they looking at of their business over the next year to be edibles? Yeah. Any idea or any projection?
That's a great question, and I, to answer that specifically, I'd just be making something up. I don't think really. I think the industry here, the market in Florida, nobody could have predicted. And even to this day, I just read a report the other day about how much flower has taken over the market. And we knew it would, but not to the extent that it has. And that report was just released, I think, last week. And so I think for anybody to, put their thumb on, what a goal is, or, what we see here happening, I think it's arbitrary, because we really don't, this market that we have here has really, it's grown exponentially fast. We have well over 400,000 patients, well over 1,000 clinicians. It's becoming more and more accepted. So I think we're gearing up, to meet the demand. There's always been in Florida this massive demand, no matter what the product. I don't think I think we'd be kidding ourselves to think that this will be any different. I think you're going to see a massive demand for edibles. And, we're going to do everything to keep up with that demand for sure. But I can't speak specifically on what our business goal is for a percentage wise of our business. I just don't have that information.
I think it's going to be difficult and I may be wrong, for physicians to get their arms around the edibles as far as recommending them. Versus a tincture that is probably a little bit closer to a medication, and flower, which is closer to a medication. Well, so I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough.
That's where I wanted to go, actually, is where do you folks recommend that physicians can look for authoritative information to to cut through the newsletters that we all get every single day in our inboxes, but to get the real information that makes sense, that it's understandable, that someone can read and take action on. Do you have some recommendations for resources?
Yeah, I wanted to make one quick comment. I think it's also interesting because they put edibles as a separate category.
Yep.
So it's not, so there's, the oral route, and then that's tinctures and capsules, right? And then they put edibles separate. So now, and I don't know if they did that just because it's something new. So if you add it from now on, you have to go forward, or if they want to distinguish, how many milligrams are the patients using on average in an edible form versus tincture. It's probably because they want to gain some information on that. That's what I would assume.
Yeah. So, all right. So that's a great question too, because it's something that I've been working, and we have now a specific team at Surterra that is specific to physician outreach. And so we've been brainstorming, because COVID really, I think for any type of business, and figuring out a way to still meet our same goals of our contacts and, our relationships, keeping our relationships, but doing it in a virtual world now. And so we've recently started a newsletter that is a newsletter geared towards physicians. That's not the, it's not the typical MMTC newsletter that's like, oh, we have edibles out, we have this out. But for instance, we just put out one last week, and it was about edibles, but it had three main points for physicians to remember. And it was, as Dr. Weiner said a second ago, is that we have to remember edibles are just like oral route. So start low, go slow. Remember, this isn't Delta 9. This isn't what we're inhaling. This is 11-hydroxy, which not only is more potent, it binds to the cannabinoid receptors stronger, and lasts on those receptors longer, but it also has an easier time crossing through the blood-brain barrier, which means you're getting more of a dose of a different chemical into the brain. So this isn't smoking, this isn't vaping, this is not those. It's much more attuned to the oral routes that we know. So remember that and guide our patients in that. And a big rule that, kind of everyone that's experienced an edible kind of knows this rule, but and you kind of chuckle about it, but you never redose within at least a 2-hour time frame. Never. And I'm sure everybody that has experience in cannabis has a story of that time they had an edible, an hour and a half in, they didn't feel anything. So what did? They took another little brownie. And then 2.5 hours in, they're in a different dimension. So the point is, so something like that. So really directed to physicians, and not the marketing content that we're so used to seeing from MMTCs, but really more directed based on research. What's the latest research that's out? What do edibles have? What is the difference? What is the sugar content in an edible? How does that affect how that edible works differently than an oral capsule that doesn't have any sugar content? So these things actually do matter medically speaking. So that newsletter is out there. There's a lot of great resources out there, but the medical resources are the hard ones to find, the ones that really are found on science and anecdotal and case studies and things like that. Michelle and I were just talking about before, is like, we love talking about case studies. We could talk about research all the time, but like the case studies are the fun ones to talk about. It's the ones that we really can challenge each other and be open to the different approaches. And so that type of platform, but it's in a virtual world. So meetings like this is a good thing. Getting the word out about conferences like this, and newsletters, from different physicians and groups. And I think that's the best at this point. Yeah. But we're constantly working on it.
Well, and also, the bioavailability is so different per person, because going through first pass effect, meaning GI and liver, there's so many things that go into play in terms of how they're metabolizing that. So other people's pharmaceuticals, their nutrition, there's a lot of factors that dictate how that may affect one over another. So that's also where the good, the cases come in, because some people may have a completely different experience from an edible. And then those are the ones that we're interested to know why, and, try to figure out how we can make our algorithms that are for the masses for the most part, and then what we're supposed to look for in these outliers.
Michelle, have you ever, I'm getting an echo, sorry. Have you ever thought about, because I love talking about bioavailability. I'm sure you've heard me talk about it all the time, but so vaping or inhaling like a 1-to-1 product, right? Bioavailability of both of those, you're talking, 50, 60%. Have you ever thought about this? And I've always looked for the research on it, and it's just not there. But an oral 1-to-1 product, what are you actually getting in the bloodstream? Because CBD bioavailability orally is very low, 5-10%. THC is much different. So is that 1-to-1 that you take orally actually a 1-to-1 medicinally?
Well, also the other thing you have to think about is if you've eaten or not. So that dictates whether it's going to the liver and the lymphatics, or if it's going straight to the lymphatics. So there's so many. So that's actually the study we're doing with the nano emulsions. And I'm sorry, we're kind of changing the topic.
That's great. I was
But-
going to move on to the research and find out a little bit more about it, to find out what actually you are studying.
But it's a really good point, because what you're trying to say is that it's a 1-to-1, but you may not be getting exactly a 1-to-1 based on how we're metabolizing it. And the research that we're doing at but everything got on hold because we have to take people's blood. And so because of COVID, they're not allowing us to do it right now. But we're looking at a nano emulsion compared to a regular tincture to look at onset and bioavailability. And then the question is, how does it change if you've eaten or not? So, and that all dictates it based on the fact that it's fat soluble. So again, all of these things are really, it's so important to first of all educate the patient, because they ask you all the time, should I take the tincture with my meal, before it, after it? So all of that can actually change the bioavailability. And then again, CBD versus THC is two different answers also. So the answer is, like, that's actually the study that we're trying to do. And it's going to take a long time, because we want to do it with the patients fed, then not fed, then a water soluble, then a fat soluble. But that's actually a great study, so that we can really give the patients information. Well, if you want the most amount of this product that you're taking, and it's CBD or THC or a ratio of the two, then we should tell them you're supposed to eat, what should you eat or you shouldn't eat. And then that way, or if you want a lower dose, maybe you want it to be less bioavailable, because maybe you don't want the THC to be so high, right? So that's a great point, and that's something that hopefully will be out in, like,
I've been
who
asking
knows,
for
'cause
that
of COVID.
research. You have no idea. I've been asking for research like that for like 4 years. So hearing that that's being done, I mean, I'm still going off of pharmacokinetics from the Journal of Investigative Pharmacology from 1986, is where some of our best pharmacokinetic information comes from, with THC and CBD. So that's awesome. That's huge that you're doing that study, and you're doing another study too recently, right?
I'm doing a few studies, but the nano one got put on hold, and the nano one is really interesting, because that's really a whole new way of using cannabis to make it the most bioavailable, and also the safest, because really it's trying to avoid smoking and vaping as much, so that you can still get a route of administration that's fairly fast and more bioavailable than an oral form. So that one I'm interested in. The cannabis and opioids one, obviously that's something that's going on. I did a cannabis and COVID survey, and we found that almost 20% of people were switching from inhalation route to another route during COVID. And the number one reason of people using cannabis was mental health. And a few other findings, but that was a survey that we did looking specifically at cannabis use during COVID.
Oh, that's cool.
Have you found that interest has increased since the last 6 months that we've been quarantined, essentially?
Yeah, definitely interest has increased. And the good thing is that we can do telemedicine. The bad thing is we can't use it for new patients. So there's a big increase in people wanting to use it. And now that people are, it's based on their comfort whether they're going to come in for a face-to-face visit. But not only do I see an increase, but the patients who have who are cannabis patients are now becoming daily cannabis users, or they're starting earlier in their day, or they're really trying to learn more about CBD so that they can incorporate THC in the daytime as well. We were even talking about how we should educate people about transitioning back to work eventually one day, because people are using cannabis now.
Well, you're like reading my mind here, because that's another subject that I wanted to go into is, you know, we have these patients that are actually, you know, they're employees as well. And there are a lot of drug-free workplace policies, no tolerance policies, and there are varying levels of drug tests out there. And certain drug tests can pick up cannabinoids. Certain drug tests can pick up just Delta-9 THC. And that can be a real issue. I know I've confronted that issue in my practice. I've seen it. Someone comes back with a positive test for cannabis or marijuana, but they never used marijuana. They only used CBD. And then they went for a confirmatory test and it came back clean, because the confirmatory test was only testing for Delta-9, but the screen test was testing for the cannabinoids. So perhaps you can educate us and tell our viewers how to explain to patients what this issue might be and how they can possibly avoid it or mitigate the problem.
You want me to do that one? I can
Sure.
discuss that if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. You
Yeah,
started,
well,
so definitely.
So I think that the urine drug test, there's actually different places that can test for different things, because I've been like an expert witness for one person who actually claimed they were using a full spectrum CBD and they were positive for THC, and that is very possible. So you can use a full spectrum CBD and be positive for THC over time. And again, since it's fat soluble, it's stored in the fat, it can accumulate over time. So obviously, like the answer is that it's a Schedule I drug. Whatever your employer says, that's the policy. And the question is whether or not a quantitative value would actually be helpful. So perhaps, and there's not a lot of information on this, and it's going to be a problem, because there's going to be people who are using full spectrum CBD that are going to be fired, and they truly are using CBD, you know, a full spectrum. I actually had a patient yesterday that has this issue with being able to return to work, and I gave him a urine a cup to what is it called, the urine drug screen, I guess, and he was positive for THC, and he was not a cannabis user, and he showed me the 2 full spectrum CBDs he's been taking, and he had a drug screen today, and he actually like asked me if I would write a note on his behalf, but there's not much that, you know, we can do. Even just, I'm assuming there could be a quantitative level that if you're a daily THC user, it's going to be very different than a full spectrum CBD, but this is really going to be, you know, a big issue. Obviously, we can do it in other forms than just urine, but for the most part, I assume this is going to be a challenge with a lot of people returning to work, or we need to like educate people about these tests.
I've always wondered, I've heard a lot of physicians too that come across this problem, and I'm not too sure about the legality of it, but of a registered cannabis patient and having a workplace that is not open to that, but then the physician actually writing them a script for Marinol. Because Marinol is a FDA approved prescription, and basically we're saying the same thing by giving them a recommendation with a medical marijuana card that yes, we approve them using cannabis. Marinol is just a pure form of a synthetic form of THC that would cause a test to be positive, but you would be protected in a workplace because of that. So I've heard of that being done before. I've always questioned, you know, this is C-Lab, so it's a good place to maybe talk about legality about it and business of it, but I've heard of that happening. The other thing that is recently I've been looking into, and it's recently hitting the market, the legal market, is that Delta-8 THC is now being sold over the counter. And they're getting away with this because it is a substrate of CBD, and because of the farm, this is totally off tangent, I'm sorry, but
No.
but it just goes to the point of workplace. What do these people do? Even when they're using a legitimate product that's over the counter, but they're coming up positive, that now you can actually purchase Delta 8 over the counter because it's being processed from CBD, and the hemp bill says that CBD or any hemp and including CBD or any type of byproduct of that hemp CBD plant. So it's really interesting. I think we're going to definitely see a lot of people having issues returning back to work when they're used to using cannabis in higher amounts for their anxiety levels. And now they got to go back to work, and it's going to be a transition. It's definitely going to be a transition for them. And it's going to be important to educate them on how to guide them to do that.
Well, what it was they figured out a way to take Delta 8 from CBD.
Right.
And I think the DEA caught on and then is trying to reschedule Delta 8.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's an issue because patients think that they're doing something healthy for themselves, you know, getting off opioids, getting off the prescription medication. They feel, you know, the best they've felt in years. And now they realize that they can't go back to work, or they're having an issue at work because they're coming back positive on a drug test when they've never used medical marijuana. They never attempted to use medical marijuana. They've never, ever wanted to use THC. So that's definitely an issue. I think it's a hidden issue. And there are no protections under Florida law, unfortunately, for employees. Some other states have protections. Florida has no protections, unfortunately, for simply being a medical marijuana patient. You can be fired at will. Florida is an at-will employment state. The employment laws are more favorable to employers than they are employees for the most part.
And the thing is, a lot of physicians don't recommend CBD isolates, right? And that the only time I probably do is when someone's going to be drug tested.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that's not as effective. We know that you need some THC and beta caryophyllene or other parts of the plant to actually activate the cannabinoid receptors. So that's a few times. That's like the one situation I'll actually recommend an isolate. But you know, it goes to it's the whole story that, well, if someone's using cannabis while at work, but then, you know, someone takes benzos or opioids, like why is one better than the other? And it's the same concept. People can take, you know, 2 or 3 of their oxycodone in the morning instead of one, or you can use a small amount of cannabis and still go to work. So it really does have to do with knowing how your body responds to it and not, you know, being responsible, obviously, but you know, that's the thing that bothers me, is that, like, this patient yesterday was asking me, well, what do you think it looks better to actually use cannabis for my pain or opioids? And you know, that's such an interesting question, because it's whose perspective is it, right? Like, well, I'm a physician, I'm recommending cannabis. I'm a physician, I'm writing you a prescription for opioids. What works better for you? Obviously, I think cannabis is better, and I can give you a million reasons why, and I can give you all the negatives about opioids, but he'll have to pick the opioids because he's going to get, you know, a urine drug screen.
Mhm.
So it's a really unfortunate situation when it really has to do with us being responsible and not going to work impaired.
Did you see there's a recent study, it was just released, about productivity
Yeah.
you saw that?
Yeah,
So the
like
productivity of people that use cannabis after work, they actually are more productive at work than people that don't use cannabis after work.
yeah.
And so the cool thing is that I've loved seeing in the Florida industry is the evolution of it. You know, when I first started, the mentors, even other family physicians, mentors of mine, would just shut the door in my face. And then a year later, they're calling me up, asking me, what's the deal? How do I do this? How do I integrate this into my practice? You see that you know, you having people in my office that were firefighters and police officers that don't want to take opiates, but they have extremely either stressful jobs and they're dealing with PTSD, so they don't want to be on antidepressants and anti-anxiolytics. But also, you know, and also they have pain. These firefighters are in constant pain all the time. Like, and there was nothing I could do for them at first. And then you see county by county, it's being allowed. It's being allowed. It's being allowed. And so I have really enjoyed seeing that evolution throughout Florida. We have a long way to go. Workplace acceptance is a huge area where we need to work on. This needs to be widely accepted. We will get there. You know, like you said, there's some other states that are absolutely, you know, I think New York last year passed a law that you could not test anymore. So I think in New York State, you can no longer test for THC for employment. We need to get to that point. And so we'll get there, but it's going to take a community effort. It's going to take physicians, MMTCs. It's going to take everybody kind of joining hands to really push that.
I think Nick and Michelle, I think it's also the insurance companies. I think the insurance companies drive the ship. The workman's comp companies are driving the ship on this one. Because even if the employer says, yes, it's okay, the workman's comp policy, which will prohibit it, can get them into a lot of trouble and maybe not even have a workman's comp policy. So unfortunately, I think a lot of it goes back to the insurance companies.
Yeah, I'm always looking for a personal injury attorney who wants to send me cannabis patients. And what I mean by that is, we get these patients, like as a pain doctor, I get the personal injury patients for physical therapy and medication management and injections and trying to prevent surgery. But when the person doesn't want surgery, or the surgery's not an indication, and they don't want opioids, or I don't want to give them opioids, then they're kind of stuck, and so obviously their legal case is not going to pay for their cannabis, but it would be an option that I would give any other patient, and then they would have to see me separately. But that's an area that since we have some attorneys here, if anyone's interested in exploring.
Well, I wanted to move on to you. I wanted to ask, what are you seeing physicians really talking about? I understand you're participating in these weekly networking groups. What are the concerns that you're encountering that we might be able to address?
We have, it's a very interesting group that got together, usually about the same, but sometimes we get some others in there. We get some medical directors from the MMTCs come on. I think, Nick, you've been on once or twice, maybe. We have some others, but a lot of it is education. I mean, it's not, a lot of them are asking questions, case studies of I have this patient in this situation, and looking for the expert, because I think you'll find that within the group that comes around, a lot of the physicians, a majority of the physicians, really don't know more than the 2 hours that they've really been given the license to be able to do this. So they're looking for education, they're looking for guidance. What Nick was saying, if they can, the MMTCs do a great job of educating them, but that's part of what they're doing. So, I mean, a couple of lead people on there, Michelle is on there, Barry's on there, I mean, the questions are always coming up, and the experts, as I would call them, are answering the questions. I mean, I think it's education, because as situations change, as the number of products are coming out, it's a question of what product do you recommend, or do you rely on the bud tender to be able to get that product? How much is the doctor really part of the patient's needs and understand what the MMTCs have to be able to say, well, based on the thousands of patients I've dealt with in this situation, and based on the other medication you may be taking, this would be a good product for you. I would say majority of doctors have no idea.
Certainly.
Well,
I think that's definitely a problem, and especially in the limited market here. Even with the doctor's recommendation, go in. I need to get one of these 5 products.
Right.
All 5 of them could be sold out. You get to the counter after you've been waiting in the waiting room, and all 5 are sold out, and you are essentially taking a recommendation from the bud tender.
Right.
You don't know what their educational background is. You don't know what they know about your experience, and unfortunately, you just can't always follow the doctor's recommendation when you get up to that counter if the product is just simply unavailable.
No, I think the bud tenders are educated. I mean, the bud tenders know what they're talking about when it comes to their products.
Oh,
certainly. The question is that you're matching the products to the patient.
And so I a little bit disagree with you, though, because the physician that's really in tune in Florida should know that availability is often a problem at some of these MMTCs. And so when I used to see patients, I would give them, I would hear them out. I would hear what their 2 big things that I need to know: their experience with cannabis, prior experience, because that helped me know dosing. And I'd want to know what their intention is. Are they okay to have any psychoactivity during the day or not? Do they want no psychoactivity? And then obviously what's wrong? What's their problem? What's their medical problem? So understanding the pathophysiology of what their problem was really helped me then direct them towards which cannabinoids or which terpenes. My patients never left my office without a list of products. And then if they didn't have that product, this is an okay second product to get. And if that dispensary didn't have those products, then go to this
Mm.
dispensary and they'll have one or two of these. So it was usually the bud, you know, if it was the bud tender or whatever, that there was a miscommunication or whatever. But my patients, and I think that's something that physicians, I've always talked about this, physicians need to, if a patient leaves your office with no clue what they're looking for or what they're going to the MMTC to get, that's a problem. And then also you have to think about consistency of these MMTCs.
Right.
They have to have their product there, and it needs to be a consistent product. It needs to be, you know, from, if you take a product, and that's one of the reasons, I mean, and not to put a plug in here, but I loved Surterra as a clinician because I knew that if my patient was successful with a 5-to-1 serene tincture, that tincture was the same exact product within a 5% variance, only 5%. The FDA on pharmaceutical drugs allows 40% variance. So I knew that serene product was within a 5% variance month to month, year to year. It was the same product every single time. You don't get that consistency in flour. You don't get, you know, we will get that consistency in edibles. But so the physicians, I agree completely, Charles, is that the education of these physicians is so imperative that they need to, and not to mention, this is the most complex medication that any patient that you have will be taking. There's no other medication that's out there that hits in multiple organ systems and works in multiple different ways in those different organ systems. The way that it works in the bones is different than the way it works in the brain, different than the way it works in the heart. And so there's no other medication like that. Tylenol works like Tylenol everywhere it works. And so it's one of the most complex medications in one of the most complex physiological systems in our body. And to think that we can just rely on somebody that's not well educated and trained in this to guide our patients is a misdirection there. So that education is so important.
But you know, Nick, what bothers me so much is who is supposed to educate the physician on the products in the dispensary. So if you're going to make cuts, like I can't even understand this. So now any dispensary that a rep from that dispensary has not come to visit me, or I haven't reached out to them, I don't know anything about their products. So why would you try to save money and cut the education from the physician, who's then going to I mean, I'm not being like condescending, but where would you cut costs? Educate the physician so the physician could educate the patient. Who's going to educate the physician? The rep. That's like a farm rep, you know? A farm rep comes and teaches us about a new product that we don't know about. So the issue is like that makes absolutely no sense. Put more money into, you know, sugar edibles, like that to me is like the biggest problem. And so now anyone who has like one rep for the whole state of Florida, or no reps, or, you know, the ones who have reps, in my opinion, would actually be the dispensaries that are going to be more productive now, because now I know, oh, you have this specific formulation, or you have this specific ratio, or I even have a face now with that dispensary, right? So I think that it's really important to bring the reps back, and therefore the physicians could be more educated to help the patients. And I also think it has to do with the physicians not having, I don't know if I want to say an ego, but learning also from the patients. Maybe the patient went to a dispensary that we're not familiar with. They tried something that kind of opens our eyes up to you know, a different product or another possibility that we can teach other patients. So it is personalized medicine, but it's also this, you know, team approach from all angles. And so when there were issues with I mean, that bothered me so much about Surterra. I'll say that, like, specifically. The fact that there are no reps there, I have no idea what products they have anymore, because how am I supposed to get educated? Thank God. And I know Jen is on this, but, you know, Jen is wonderful and teaches, and Klaus teaches me so much about Trulieve, obviously, but that's something that personally bothers me a lot.
No, I thank you for bringing that up. Oh, I got a big echo. Thanks for bringing that up. Because I hear your point exactly. And it's something that, especially in COVID times now, where even if you wanted to get into a physician's office, a lot of them aren't allowing it. And so how do you appropriately, how do we come up with different ways, different avenues to educate physicians? And that's something that I've been really working hard on, is with just kind of like this main line of easy communication, of constant, you know, whether it's the educational newsletters going out, or different care packages being sent out. And yeah, it's been a challenge, and COVID's definitely been a huge challenge, with not being able to have those touch points, and to think about, and really it's not just in cannabis, but really it's in all business, is um, COVID has really caused us to lose that personal contact. But how do we still have the same effectiveness? And that's something that we've really been working hard on with this new physician management team that we have at Surterra, is to be able to make those touch points, to be available, to have educational things, where we are listening, and we are approaching it in the safest and best way possible, that's still going to meet those needs. Because I absolutely agree that need of the physician for that education in the office is huge. And so how do we go about doing it, in kind of this era now, where there aren't reps, or there aren't many reps at all? And I think, you know, it's been a challenge, but it's one that, you know, I think that we have been tackling, and with the newsletter that's been going out, and our new, I mean, we have a whole team now that's dedicated at a corporate level to physician engagement. And it's really been awesome to work with them, to see, like, and to brainstorm of, okay, like, these physicians need us. They need education. They need, and I'm sitting there like yelling. I'm like, guys, I know what the physicians need, because I am one of them. Like, this is what we need. Like, you know what? I like swag once in a while.
Right.
But also, I want to know about this new product that just came out. And these two new products that just came out with a very close terpene profile. Well, where is this one product going? What type of patient is that product going? What type of patient is that product going to? So it's so important. I couldn't agree with you more that that education is so important.
It's just so crazy when I see a whole line of new products came out in the dispensary, but nobody's teaching us about it, right? And so I don't know if do the dispensaries send out information just to like listservs of physicians? Like, how are we supposed to know that a new product came out in a dispensary if a rep doesn't really share that with us, or if it's something unique, right? Like we all found out about edibles obviously the same time, but you know, specific products, if the dispensary wants something to be purchased, then don't you think we should not just talk to the people who work at the dispensary, but the physicians, so that they make the recommendation? I don't think they get how important what we say. You know, we choose which we're not supposed to dictate where you're supposed to go. We're supposed to give you all the options. But if we have certain patients who take certain products that are very effective, then we're going to recommend those more. So it really helps to educate the physicians on new products and on all of their products. And that it's just something that, you know, I guess unless you're a physician, maybe you don't understand the importance of the rep. And, you know, the rep, I hate to call it, I don't know what else to say, representative, but, you know, that is a very important role. That liaison is extremely important for the dispensary success and the patient.
Well, that's what we've tried to do with that group that I put together. And Dr. Weiner, you've been on that a couple of times, most of the time, is try to get physicians together. And I think part of the issue becomes physicians need a place that they feel comfortable, that they're with their peers and can open up and talk about it without having any kind of outside influences. And that's what we've tried to provide them, is the ability to ask maybe that stupid question, okay, to be able to get an answer so they can treat their patient better. And being able to get them more information is kind of what we try to do. It's beneficial to a lot of physicians that need to learn what's going on from the very beginning. We've had conferences on botanicals mixing with cannabis. We've talked about terpenes. You know, we've talked about a lot of different things. But I think physicians need to feel comfortable in a group. Am I wrong with themselves?
No, definitely. Yeah.
Right. You're 100% right. And it's more than just, you know, we have to really, because I get it, the reps are great, you know, the newsletters are great, but we have to really reimagine the entire relationship between MMTCs and physicians. And that is something, I mean, for instance, like we started a huge project 4 months ago, and it was to see how updated the information that's given, you know, online of physician locations and contacts and all that, how up to date is it? Well, it hasn't been updated. You know, there's the DOH and the online, you can find physician information. So we're like, well, wait a second, we need to actually reach out to each physician and make sure that the contact information is right. So 4 months ago, we started our total revamp of, okay, well, to be able to communicate effectively to these physicians and to be able to educate and do all these things, we need to completely start from the ground up, because we saw the importance. And so we went through like over 1,500 physicians and individually contacted like over 1,000 of them to find their best contact information, the best email. And that was the start of it. And that was about 4 months ago in the middle of COVID, when we just couldn't get there anymore. We couldn't get to offices and with smaller teams and so on and so forth. And so it's a work in progress. And even on, you know, we have our Justice League. It's this group of doctors that kind of, we all talk back and forth on Facebook, but even on there, reaching out and saying, hey, what works? What doesn't work? So this open, and that's something that I love that I'm doing is helping to bridge that gap between the MMTCs and the physicians, because we have to work as a team here, because at the end of the day, as I was saying before, this is the most complex medication. This is the most complex physiological system, and we need to educate those physicians so that our patients are handled in the most appropriate and successful way possible. So that's definitely been at the forefront of efforts across the board, is how do we better engage physicians? How do we better educate? You know, even the conferences are great, but what do you do in a pandemic? I used to love speaking at these conferences. You know, I'd speak in a room of 400 physicians. Well, guess what? There's no conferences anymore. So how do I effectively reach those same 400 physicians in the same way as I did in a face-to-face in their room? And that's been a challenge, I think, across the board, definitely in the past 6 months, that we're tackling, that we're getting on top of. And it's slow. It's a slow progress, but I think there's some great things happening, and you know, I'm looking forward to continuing that work. But I hear you loud and clear. I definitely do.
So definitely, the doctors are definitely the doorway, I guess, in the Florida program, to say the least. That's the only way you can get into the program, and really a lot of the information starts and ends there. Or, you know, unfortunately, sometimes patients might consult family members that they think might have experience, but that's not necessarily appropriate medical advice. It sounds like cannabis recommendations are something that if someone might want to just start dabbling in, it would probably be a great idea to just maybe do on the side. Do you guys agree?
Well, my first answer to that is always have enough staff, have enough
Right.
employees.
And why is that? Why do you need to have a lot of staff to do recommendations?
So the amount of paperwork is really something that physicians hate, right? They hate writing notes and they hate paperwork, or at least I do. But the amount of paperwork is so ridiculous in terms of the fact that you write your own, you know, a medical chart on the patient. Then you have the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, where you put in the milligrams and the route of inhalation, the route of the mechanism of how they're taking the medication. And you know that, so you have that, and then you have their diagnosis and whether or not they are one of the likewise debilitating conditions, and you have to send in the paperwork. Then if they want flower, you have to send in other paperwork to state why it's okay for this patient to use flower. Then you have the consent that's like 7 pages long that the patient has to sign, and then you have to scan in the chart. And then you have all the mistakes that you make when you enter the patient into the registry, when you put them as a male or not a female, or the address is wrong, or you know the email, social security number. So there's so many mistakes there. And then you have the amount of phone calls that come in about issues with getting their card and just kind of understanding the process. And that's even before the patient purchases cannabis. So the staff is extremely, being able to, it's not just let's add this to my practice. It's, do I have enough staff to help me do this well? Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of phone calls and you're going to not want to do it at all. Like I just talked to this guy, physician yesterday, and he said, at this point, I'd rather just, improve my golf game. That was his comment to me, because he said, I think it's really interesting, but I'm not going to take it on in my practice. And so I think a lot of people think that cannabis physicians do it for the money, really. But honestly, the amount of time and work and staff, and then half the time we're just feeling bad that the patient has to pay for their own medication, that we, a lot of us just kind of help them out in certain ways. So
you can't really do this on your own, you'd say. I mean, this isn't something where a physician could just pick up and decide, oh, on the side, I'm going to do this without any sort of support staff or any sort of additional equipment. This is something that really takes a little bit more of a time investment, correct? I mean, this is something you're going to want to set up your practice to have this as a particular segment and not necessarily something to dabble in on the side, really.
Yeah, because you're just going to be frustrated. So instead of being satisfied with the visits and enjoying teaching them and seeing them, improve, you're going to just be frustrated with the calls and the paperwork and the scanning. So it's really to know that and to understand that first, and then and I think that's actually where I think the reps really helped. I think that they would help start new physicians off and then guide them as to CBD versus THC, route of administration, all of that. A lot of the reps were very helpful. And then I think that's like, what Charles is doing with this organization. We're trying to help other physicians get started, help them with some templates, for the likewise conditions, and just be there so that they could ask questions. We just want to make sure they feel comfortable asking questions, because, that's the only way we can all learn. And I'm sure other people are in the same boat that they are if they have that question.
Well, this has really been great. We're going to have to wrap it up soon. Are there any final points that anyone would like to add? Had a great discussion here.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a little bit. It's just the fact that, you said it needs to be a separate kind of a segment of, you have to really accept that. I think the market itself shows that, because when we first started, the first year, you saw all these physicians sign up, and then you saw that number drastically drop. And then you saw the majority of physicians doing it. There was a report that came out last year that 100 doctors were taking care of 90% of the patients in Florida. And so you ask your question, well, why? And a lot of negative press came out about that, because there was like, well, are these like the old, it was very wrong press that came out that was like, well, is this the new type of methadone clinic type stuff? Mm-hmm. But it's not that at all. It's that these physicians that ended up really being the top physicians with the most patients, it's because they figured out a way to streamline it in a way where you can educate very well. And that's key, because the physicians that would just sign you up for a card and then send you on your way with no education, those physicians went out of business very quickly. And we saw that all over the place the first year. And then you have your physicians that learned how to streamline it into their practice, really took this seriously, educated themselves on it first, and then, figured out all these things. And then they became the ones that really, truly were passionate about it. And that's became a huge part of what they do, if not the only thing that they do. And it's because of how passionate they are about the medicine. So absolutely, if you get into this as a physician, don't just think that you can just do it on the side without really committing to it, because you're going to be one of those 1,000 physicians that fell off in the first year. Have your goal be to be one of those top 100, because that's where, if you're passionate and you educate yourself, then you're going to be very successful, not only as a clinician, but also in the business of it. That's it.
And your patients will be a lot more happy. They won't be calling you from the dispensary when their recommendation is not as they expected it to be at all hours. There's just a lot of improvement in that respect. So I thank everyone for joining us tonight. I hope this panel was worthwhile. I certainly thought it was. And if there's any follow-up questions, please post them on Facebook, and we'll attempt to address them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.